and justice for all. All right, thank you everyone for coming out. I'll take roll call. Everyone is present and accounted for. Is there any public comment from the board? Seeing none, is there any public comment from the public not related to any of the agenda items? All right, seeing none, we have an appointment for a non-material change for 7 Trillium Court. Is there anybody here to represent that? Please. If you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and speaking into the microphone.
I'm John Arnold. I live there. Been there about 7 months. My request is that the existing deck that was present when we bought the house was in decrepit condition. So we demolished it. We'd like to replace it with a deck in the same pattern, other than the fact that the depth of it, we would like to increase by 2 feet. I submitted this plan actually before we even moved here to the Board of Trustees. They approved it. I submitted evidence to that for you. And the only changes would be, it's been before the Conservation Commission. They approved it as well. The construction changes are minimal. Most of the footings would remain in place, and cantilevered extensions would give us the 2 feet we need. However, on the narrowest side, the 2 feet does not permit cantilevering because it's so close to the ground. Can't get under there to do it. So those footings would be moved out 2 feet. They're away from the wetlands. It's not an issue, I don't think. Do you have any questions? It's right, kind of straightforward.
So, Mr. Chair, by way of background a little bit, no one on the current board was involved with the planning board at the time that this project was approved. This is over at the Woodlands off of Northfield Road. It's a planned residential area, so it's a single lot with a series of exclusive use areas and some multi-unit buildings. Contained within the approval is a requirement that buildings be constructed per the submitted plans at the time of construction, and that any non-material change be submitted to the planning board for a finding that it be a non-material change. So the building inspector, in reviewing this, was uncomfortable allowing for the additional square footage on the deck without the planning board making the finding that it would be a non-material change. Mr. Arnold lives in one of the detached single-family homes, which enjoys the privilege of an exclusive use area, which would be equivalent to a small lot. My understanding is that through reading the master deed and the rules and regulations, that he's responsible for the lot as any single-family homeowner would be when they own the property that goes along with their residence. But just based on some of the wording in the special permit approval and some of the way the master deed is written, the building inspector and through conversation with me, we felt it was probably, this was the simplest, cleanest way to avoid something in the future where someone else may want to make a more substantial change that the board may be uncomfortable with or the building commissioner may be uncomfortable with. So Mr. Arnold's here tonight for a finding that what he's doing is a non-material change.
Are there any setbacks on the EUA that...
I was going to ask the exact same
Okay, would it be encroaching on someone else's EUA?
It would not,
Okay.
and that's why the homeowners association is required to sign off on work on the projects, and seeing as they've approved the project many months ago, we didn't see anything that was particularly problematic, but again, just making sure that all the paperwork is in order. We wanted to move through this process.
Okay. That was my only real question.
Any more questions from the board?
I will just state that I had a teenage job painting these buildings when they were being built, so that was 31 years ago, so it's understandable that it's needing to be replaced.
So I guess I was incorrect that none of you had any involvement with it.
Not on the planning board.
All right, so basically, we just need to make a determination whether it's a non-material change or
Correct.
not? And do we need a...
I have a question. I see that as just a difference of 2 feet in depth, but how wide is the...
How wide is it? It's, I believe it's 60 feet wide on the longest dimension and 35, 36 on the other.
So that's changing to 62, 35, basically, or
I'm
60,
giving you, I
37?
think, the added 2 feet to that.
You're giving the added 2 feet.
Yeah, but I won't swear by the exactness of those dimensions, but it's close.
Okay.
Are you asking if he's expanding in 2 directions or just in one?
No, I was just wondering how big the deck actually was.
Okay.
Yeah, I should know the percentage increase in the square footage. I don't off the top of my head.
So you're going from 60 by 34 to 60 by 36?
It would,
No, I think the other dimension.
yeah.
62.
Yeah. That's approximately correct, yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So is this the deck that's in the rear of your home, on the opposite
is.
side of the driveway?
It
Okay,
is.
so this
It
is his
faces
building, and he's expanding it towards the woods, so he's not
Yeah.
encroaching on anybody.
Okay.
Correct.
I'm looking at it
Okay.
over here.
Yeah,
Well-
I saw it on.
Mr. Chair, I move that we make a determination that this is a non-material change.
I second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you for following the process. All right, we'll now move into the public hearing for Tri-Town Landing, 37 Youngs Road.
The Lunenburg Planning Board will hold a public hearing on May 14th, 2018, 6:35 PM, Joseph Vallata Meeting Room, Town Hall, 17 Main Street, Lunenburg, Mass., to hear and discuss a modification to a site plan approval and associated waivers under Section 250-8.4 and 250-4.13 of the Code of the Town of Lunenburg, Mass., for modification to the buildings, parking and unit configuration construction at 37 Youngs Road / Tri-Town Drive, map 115, parcel 0017. Applicant is Great Bridge Properties, 814 Elm Street, Suite 400, Manchester, New Hampshire. Owner is Tri-Town Landing Limited Partnership, 476 John Fitch Highway, Fitchburg, Mass. Materials are available for viewing at the planning office, 916 Massachusetts Avenue, Lunenburg, Mass. 01462.
Thank you. If you'd just like to identify yourself and if you're going to present. Yes, please.
Why don't I do a quick synopsis and we'll hand it over to the people that know what they're talking about. My name is Bill Castleton. I'm one of the principals of Great Bridge Properties. We have been developing Tri-Town Landing for, I guess, what is over 10 years now. We were not the original developers, so when it first came through to these boards, it was originally done by another party, and we stepped in their shoes and picked it up and have developed what's there now. One thing, I don't know if, I think it matters for the record, our address is 118 Maplewood Avenue in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and I think we moved, and our old address is in the application and was just read into the record. So I just want to make that clear for what it's worth. I'll make this quick because I know that most of these board members, most of you, I should say, were not here 10 years ago. If you're at all lucky, if you're still here now, I feel bad for you. So just to make it really quick, before we show you the engineering on this, this property was approved back in 2007 within the Tri-Town Landings Tri-Town Smart Growth Overlay District as a 40R project. It was modified again in 2009 as a 6-building 204-unit apartment complex under 40R. During the years since then, we have developed 4 of those 6 buildings. So there's 4 existing buildings, and there's 2 approved and waiting to be built. Sometime a few years ago, we just started to look at the broader rental market in this, central Mass here, looked at the long-term demographics, and thought that a switch to a senior development might make some sense, both for our own long-term product, but also for how the project serves the community here in Lunenburg as well, because the town certainly worked with us in this development, and we felt that was a worthwhile direction to go, to put some mix in the rental development out there in Tri-Town. So what we have proposed here, which we'll go over in detail, is to take the final 2 buildings, which we routinely refer to as buildings 5 and 6, and I think they probably were labeled that way on the original site plan, and combine them into one building and develop that as a single building for senior housing. And the reason for combining the buildings is to try to get access to amenities that we'll incorporate into that building, being community rooms, media rooms, management office. We'll have an office for supportive service coordinator. We've have a letter agreement of sorts with Montechusett Daycare to fill that role for us on a contract basis. So the reason for trying to get to one building, as opposed to just developing the 2 remaining buildings, is to make it easy for the residents to access all those amenities in one place, rather than having to have someone leave their building to go to the community room or to get, So that was really the what was behind us trying to consolidate these 2 buildings. Otherwise, I'll hand it over, unless you have questions of me, I'll hand it over to Chris Anderson from Hannigan Engineering to talk about what has changed and what hasn't changed in the site. The site really doesn't change that much, but he can probably go through that in better detail than I, unless you have any upfront questions of me. No?
All right, by all means.
Chris Anderson?
Thank you.
Chris, before you begin, would you mind just putting that back just a little bit so I can see it? Thank you.
He said it has to show that way as the camera.
All right.
Did you indicate to the residents there?
Thank you. For the record, Chris Anderson with Hannigan Engineering. I'm going to go through the overview of the entire project, just so that everybody's familiar, because I'm aware that a few of the board members weren't here back when it was originally approved. As you can see from the plan, along the right-hand side is Young's Road, and as you go down to the bottom of the page is going towards Summer Street, John Fitch Highway, and that road system. This was originally a drive-in theater, and was repurposed and redeveloped as such. Like Bill Castleton had mentioned, this project originally had 6 total buildings. It's the intent to eliminate 2 of them and construct one large single building in the area of building number 6, which is in the center of the development. In its place, it'll be a senior housing development with a total of 70 units, 62 being 1-bedroom and 8 2-bedroom units, resulting in a total unit count of 201 on the property. During the 2009 approval, 204 were originally approved, so we're reducing the total unit count. So we are removing one of the buildings. In its place, we're proposing to do some sort of green space for the community. Because we are reducing the unit counts, originally approved there was 21 3-bedroom units. Due to the general development, this kind of development, 3-bedroom units don't make sense in this kind of development. So we're removing the 3 bedrooms and incorporating the 2 and the bedroom units into this. Because we're reducing these counts with the units, we were able to reduce the overall parking count. Under the current, sorry, there's a lot of numbers floating around. Yep. All right, so under the proposed plan, currently there are 193 existing parking spaces on the property. Back when this was originally approved, there were two parking counts that were provided. A reduced rate, which was provided with for a condition of a reserved parking area if deemed necessary. The reduced parking count was at 1 bedroom per single unit, 1.5 per 2, and 2 per 3 unit. Under the proposed plan, we are keeping that consistent ratio and providing the requisite reserved parking area if that's ever deemed necessary. With the additional unit counts and the alteration of that, we were required to provide 74 new parking spaces. The plan proposed provides 77 parking spaces, resulting in a total of 207 parking spaces that would be constructed during this phase. If deemed necessary, we would construct the reserved parking area, which would allow for the parking count to be bumped up to the bylaw rate. Under the bylaw rate, we're required to have 317 units. Under this, would provide 318, so one excess. With respect to the utilities and everything on the site, the alignment of the roadways has remained unchanged. The parking configurations have been modified a little bit to accommodate the site and the new proposed building. The water line and the sewer line that are on the site will be utilized. There will be an extension for the water main to bring it to the front of the building. Sewer main, or the forced sewer main, will remain as is, and additional tie-in would be tied in there. The drainage system has remained unchanged and will stay as such. Because we are reducing the overall parking count, we are also able to reduce the amount of parking, that's corresponding with that. As such, there's actually a decrease in impervious area of about 2,500 square feet. So we are reducing the overall impervious on the site.
Sorry, I just had one question before you go further. Are you getting your parking count from the bylaw at the time the original application was submitted, or what we currently have?
What's currently in the bylaw right now, yeah. That's the general gist of the project. We are requesting a few waivers. I can run through those quickly if the board would like, or if there's any questions.
Before you do that, can you just show us what the previous proposed and what the current proposed, the delta of the two? Because a lot of things say proposed and proposed, so it's hard to tell what was proposed from the revised and what the new proposed is.
The red was the original.
Is it? That was that. So these were two buildings?
No, there was the original had, where it says proposed green space.
Yes.
There was a building there, and then there was a building
So that's building one and
perpendicular
building
to
two?
it, moving, facing
So
the
these
parking
two,
lot.
so these two red outlined were the
Correct,
original
are the
buildings?
buildings that were approved previously.
Okay.
So just for clarification, this was in the area of building number 5, which will be the proposed green space.
Right.
Building number 6 was in the interior island, if you will, of the
And
development.
you're replacing it with this building number 5, which is this inverted V-shaped building. What was previously on that left of building 5?
Can you please say that again, sorry?
So, if you look at this inverted V of the proposed building 5, what was originally here?
That was originally just green space.
So it was green space, okay.
Yes.
So you're looking at moving the green space out to where the original building 5 used to be,
Correct.
then consuming that interior green space for this V-shaped building.
Correct.
Okay, I think I understand what you're trying to do now. That kind of moves the green space pretty far from the playground area and makes it no longer central to the...
There would still be some green space along that existing parking area, so we're not completely eliminating it, but there is some still located right over the drainage infrastructure.
What is the structure right here? That's a drain?
That's an underground drainage.
Recharge, yeah.
So so the drainage isn't going to be impacted by all of that green space moving?
No, that's a concrete vault or a series of underground tubes. Is it chambers?
Chambers.
And oftentimes, those are under parking lots.
The site tiering is the same in either case, right?
Yep.
You didn't change that. The way that it's like we're moving from 388 to 380. Right?
He's talking the slope on the...
Slope right there?
Yeah, we had to increase the slope a little bit in that area just because of the elevation of the floor and allowing accessibility to that area.
Oh, okay.
So-
That's now higher than it was?
I believe it's higher than it was originally.
Are you still continuing with your presentation?
All right, so I'll go through the waiver request real quick.
So there's no concern with the water runoff into the flood area from this hill?
Yeah, is that going to impact?
The downspouts on the roof should collect the rain.
So everything will, okay.
That
There's less
increased-
total roof
That
area,
increased
right?
slope isn't going to impact the playground area?
No, we've graded it so that there is a little bit of a leveling area prior to that, and it's going to be a grass slope. That's through the chair, if you don't mind, I can rotate the presentation board so the public can see. Go
Sure,
over there real
please do,
quick.
yep.
So just for clarification, there was originally a proposed building number 5 located in this general area. In that place, we're going to be constructing a proposed green space for use for the residents. Building number 6 was located within this original island area. In its place, we'll be constructing the proposed building for senior living. Is there any questions I can help clarify with? So I'll go through the waiver list real quick. Our first request is for the respect to the garden apartment. Per the bylaw, a multifamily residential building shall not be more than 3 floors tall. Under this proposed development, we're proposing to use 4 floors. The second request is with respect to the density. Under the bylaw, a density of 22.03 dwelling units per acre is required. Under this proposed development, we'll be doing 21.8 units per acre, so we're reducing that. The third request is with respect to the 3-bedroom units on the property. Per the bylaw, not less than 10% of the residential units shall be within the units shall be a 3-bedroom unit. Because we are reducing the amount of 3-bedroom units in the site, we are requesting that waiver to be allowed to be dropped down to 6.5%. The fourth request is with respect to the age restrictions. We are requesting that a senior living facility be allowed, which is proposing an age restriction on the property, or on that one individual building, sorry. The next one is respect to the building height. Per the bylaw, no building shall be taller than 38 feet measured from the highest level abutting the building. Under the original approval, 50 feet was granted by the board. Under this request, we are requesting that 57 feet be allowed. The next waiver request is with respect to the unit distribution within the development. Per the bylaw, 20% of the units shall be 1 bedroom, 70% shall be 2, and 10% shall have 3 bedrooms. Under this proposed configuration, we're requesting that a total of 42.3% be single-bedroom units, 51.2 units be for 2-bedroom units, and 6.5 for the 3 bedrooms. The next request is with respect to the parking. Per the bylaw, dwellings for 2 2 parking spaces for each dwelling unit containing 2 or 3 bedrooms, 1 parking space for each single dwelling unit containing 1 bedroom. Under this request, we're requesting to continue the previously approved ratio of 1 bedroom gets 1 parking space, 1.5 spaces per 2-bedroom unit, and 2 per 3-bedroom unit.
Can I just stop you right there? Just I have a question for clarification. So you're talking about the entire project with these density and dimensional regulations? Is that correct? Because you said you were getting rid of you're eliminating the 3-bedroom units in this structure, correct?
In this structure,
Okay.
but
So you're saying it's going to affect the total?
it'll affect the overall, but we aren't changing any of the other bedroom
Got it.
configurations.
Just one clarification. Thank you.
And the last request is with respect to guest parking. The location and number of guest parking spaces shall be approved per the site development review. A waiver is requested to allow 4 parking spaces for visitors on the property. Previously approved were 10 parking spaces. As this project has been around for quite some time, there hasn't been any issues with parking as of right now, so. And that would be it.
Are the units constructed, there's 131 units constructed, are they all occupied now?
Yes.
And today, there's how many parking spots constructed?
There are 193 parking spaces.
And how many, if you don't mind saying this again, how many are you increasing? How many are you adding?
Per the bylaw, we require, or per the reduced rate, we're required to produce 74 parking spaces. We are providing 77.
How tall are the existing buildings, 3 or 4 floors?
3 floors.
Yeah, so you're proposing adding a 4th floor and bumping up another 7 feet over the maximum height?
Yes.
Actually, another, over the allowed height, the maximum's 38, they're almost doubling the...
Oh, right, yeah, the allowed was 50 and they want to go to 57.
Now, since that's a dimensional regulation, are we allowed to vary that, or is that ZBA?
You're allowed in this specific zone through this specific bylaw to vary that.
Okay.
So, just for these, with the additional language that you've put in here to account for the whole project, I'm going to ask you just a couple questions just to break it down. I know you've already answered these questions, but I must not have properly written them in my notes. So what I'm seeing is, just to confirm, 62 units will be 1 bedroom. Is that correct?
Correct, within this new building.
And then 8 units will be 2 bedrooms.
Correct.
So that's an addition of 70 units. 70 units, correct?
That'll be, the building will have 70 units in it, yes.
Okay. For those 70 units, based on the language we have here, there'll be 77 parking spaces with a total of 4 guest parking spaces.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm going to assume that if this is senior housing, that there will be, Thanksgiving, you might have family over, weekends, grandkids may come over. So if you can just turn this around, if you can identify where the overflow will actually be. So where do you expect people to park when this lot is full? As I expect that it will be.
For the record, Bill Hannigan with Hannigan Engineering. Part of the calculation that we're working on, I understand your point, first off, but part of the calculation that we're working on is that there are already some excess parking spaces based upon the formula that are already constructed. So even though we have 70 units that are going to be proposed by this particular building and only 77 spaces being constructed, the ratio still holds true for the whole project as a whole. So the amount of parking in the area still is adequate for the additional parking that you'll talk about, that you're describing, and I'll move over to the board and point that out now.
Well, I mean, a follow-up on that is just currently, if I heard this correctly, you have, how many units are currently occupied? Did you say 113? Was that accurate?
131.
131. So for 131 parking spaces,
131 units.
excuse me, 131 units, you have 193 parking
Correct.
spaces. So for 131 units, you have 193 parking spaces. Of those 131 units, 13 of them are 3 bedrooms, and 103 are 2 bedrooms. So I think it can be a reasonable assumption that several of those homes have 2 cars. So my question, which I understand where you're going, but my question is, when this parking lot is full, where do you expect the additional parking to happen at?
Well, obviously, if it's full, there's no additional parking.
Correct. So where do you think people will actually park?
Okay, so let me go back to my first statement. There's existing parking that's already built in this area here.
Yep.
That's part of the excess parking that we're talking about, which is right adjacent to this building in this area here. So there's more than enough additional parking in the area. And to the best of my knowledge, they've never experienced any parking overflow issues at the site thus far. So I understand what your point is relative to how many parking spaces are required by the regulations, but actually, in a development like this, when we did the original study, I think that we had figured out on your other projects, wasn't it somewhere around 0.67 spaces per unit or per bedroom to that effect?
More per bedroom.
Yeah.
So we currently,
Good.
If you wouldn't mind using the microphone, please. If you just wouldn't mind using the microphone.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Being recorded.
The first phase of this property was built in 2010, and so with the current 131 units we have there now, we have 170 cars identified on leases. And so we have an excess of 23 parking spaces currently with those 131 units. So we're just going off our experience in the field of actually operating the property. We've never had a full parking lot, just as a matter of the demographics of the project. And that's with those 131 units being, on average, 2-bedroom units. So you have some residents who don't have a car at all. Tri-Town Landing, as it is, has some seniors living there now, as you might expect. Some don't have cars. You have usually 2-bedroom units. Some will have 2 cars, some will have 1 car. Usually a 3-bedroom unit will have 2 cars. But that's our experience. We currently have 170 cars on site with 131 units. So it's based on that experience over the past number of years that we're gauging our parking to, kind of keep it consistent with what the original approval was on a per unit basis.
Okay. I appreciate the answer, and I'll step back for a second and offer a comment. My comment is that, in general, well, first, I'm a property manager, and in general, I strongly believe that Lunenburg needs more senior housing. So I think that just on the idea that you're going to take some units that were previously going to be designated for other purposes and then have them designated for senior housing, that concept is something that I automatically can get behind. Now, then there's the practice of this, which is, I believe our role is to look at our bylaws and make a determination of whether or not the plan that you're submitting is compliant with the rules that we're expected to abide by. Aside from my very strong opinion that we need additional senior housing in Lunenburg. So if I can envision a circumstance in which you have most seniors, in which seniors are home for the holidays, and this is what I'm trying to do here, and assuming that most people have 2 kids or 3, and that each kid comes in their own car with their own family, what I'm trying to envision is that day in which your parking lot is full. And so in that circumstance, where will people park? I understand everything that has been said, but looking at the road surrounding, looking at this entire layout, I understand that your argument is that the parking that you've provided is adequate. What I'm trying to suppose is, we can look around town and people have graduation parties and we can see that parking is all over the place. But certainly the amount of parking that, the house is certainly within the limits of the bylaw. So in the circumstance that everyone's home for the holidays and the grandkids are over and the kids are over, the parking lot is full, I'm going to use your analogy
okay, to describe what will likely happen on this site. Okay, so you're correct. I have an elderly parents, 2 sets of them, you know, for my wife and myself, and we go there, sometimes they come to our house. So the same type of thing that happens where you have your normal parking where the senior parking is. The people that have vehicles will have them there. And the same people that live in these apartments will likely also leave to go visit their parents. And the likelihood would be it would almost work itself out because of the fact that the people that are leaving would leave spaces open that the people coming to visit could then park in to visit the parents or grandparents, and then when they leave, the other people would be coming back. Now, that's I think the general function of how it would work. Okay? One of the things I want to point out on the plan is that we can meet all the parking requirements of the bylaw. However, when we were dealing with this project right at the beginning, one of the biggest concerns the board, the prior board, or it might have been the prior board at that point, was the amount of impervious area that would be created by meeting the bylaw with respect to parking. And the idea of creating reserve parking on the site, is that the next plan? Yeah, so this is upside down, but let me flip it around. So this is the reserve parking plan. So if there is a problem that is handled or observed by the management company and/or by the town, the reserve parking plan has complete parking for the entire site under the bylaw, not by waiver under 40R, but the full bylaw can be met with that parking. And the intent of us doing it that way back in 2005 or 6 or 7 was to minimize the amount of impervious area on the project. Now, what we've done with the drainage is the drainage incorporates all of that. So if we have to add the parking, the drainage can handle it. It's already been accounted for, okay? So that's really the beauty of how we've done it here, to address your issue. So if there is parking in the future that's a problem, you know, in these areas here, we might have to go back to conservation to construct those 14 spaces or whatever in that area. We will have to come back and tell the board, yes, we're going to put this reserve parking in. But the function of it for the past 7-10 years has been sufficient parking on the property without any problems. This is a different animal, and I get it. So it may be that we do need to supplement the parking on the project, but for now, what we wanted to do was be able to construct it based upon the ratios that we've been using thus far. And once that is full, active, a couple years down the road, if there is a problem with parking, we need more parking, we have the ability and the mechanism to be able to do it right on the plans.
Okay, so...
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, please.
So just so I have the math correct, so you're proposing a total of 267 parking spots when it's all said and done? Is that what it comes out to?
260 is what, 270 is what I'm counting.
270 or 267?
193 plus 70.
270,
270?
yes. Under the bylaw, it'd be 327. And the plan shows, this is the 270 is what's required.
That's per our reduced rates.
Right. But we have more than that, I believe, don't we?
No, we have 270.
270. And then under the bylaw, I believe we have more. I think we have 200, yeah, we need 318 would be provided,
Okay.
including visitor parking.
So the
Or
proposed change, which
excluding
was
visitor parking.
1 spot for single bedroom, 1.5 for 2 bedrooms, and 2 for 3 bedrooms, by my math, brings you up to 267 spots. You're proposing 270, so that lines up with
Right.
that proposal. Okay. Just so I understand that.
Oh, you all set?
So go ahead, Gabe.
So with the reduction in impervious surface, are you picking up green space? Is the difference is that what makes up the green space that you have added?
This green space in this area here has been added, so the 5% change that we're talking about pre and post, or pre-approval and present approval, is based upon changing of the configuration of the building from one building with a lot of parking in front of it to what we have here. Okay?
And so this area over which was previously going to be parking, that's over that drainage chamber, right there. that's going to be green space now as well? That'll be...
That always has been planned to be green space. The parking that would be over that would be if we needed to implement the reserve parking.
You need to,
To a
okay.
grander scale. There's already reserve parking that we can fit in, I want to say 20 or 30 spaces around the building that we have right now. That would be a small addition to kind of incrementally bump it up. But if it becomes even a bigger issue, we have the ability to put this entire lot in, which would then make it comply with the bylaw.
What's the trigger mechanism for that? You're just going to wait and see whether or not your inhabitants want that? Is that what you're...
I want to say that during, and Marjorie helped me here, I think that during the original process, I think that there were some original reviews as we went through each building, how is the parking doing? And now that we're at the last building, I think that we've never got to the point where the parking's a problem, you need to add more parking. Does that sound?
That's in my recollection, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it was kind of, as we went from, we built this in phases. This was phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So as we went through each phase, it was kind of a check and balance, because we came to the board for each phase to be actually constructed. And as we went through each phase, there was a kind of a, no one, I guess the best way to put it is that no one brought up the fact that there's a huge parking problem. So the parking was basically just continued the way we were doing it. And thus far, we have had the same success that we've had before. This, as I said, is a different animal. There may be some differences, but we do have some incremental increases we can make right along the edge here. And then we have a major parking bump up that we could do if we had to do it in that area as well.
So, through the chair.
Yes.
Adam, what is the assurance that we have on if there's a parking problem 3 years down the road, that they come back and put parking in? Because the project will be done.
Correct.
Is it
You can
term of the
do,
occupancy permit or a term of the permit that they
there is
have?
not a term of occupancy permit. You could, similar to other permits that have been in the past, where you have an ability to review the permit periodically. And the reality is, it's in their best interest to have parking. As much as it may cost them to build and maintain the parking, it costs them more for people to move out because there isn't any parking. So, I think that you could condition that they've proposed to you that they have these 14 spaces on the south side of the project that they can build out adjacent, that were originally approved as part of when there were 3 and 2 bedroom units. And they've identified they have this additional capacity to construct parking. And I think what you could probably do is word a condition in a way that should parking be occupied to a certain percentage for a certain time period weekly, that it trips them into constructing the additional parking.
I don't think the general parking will be an issue. I think, like Michael Ray is saying, holidays or something like that, maybe when we wind up with cars parked along the road and stuff.
Well, and I think that really it's going to become an internal problem. I don't know about you, I'm probably not going to be out on Young's Road parking if I'm visiting somebody there and there isn't any parking. I'm not going to go, let me drive out to Young's Road. I might drive over to Builder's Supply and see if the gate's open and park there, or I'm going to pull up on the grass inside and that becomes an issue for them. And I think that as planners, this is something that we struggle with across the board. We have these parking lots, malls, box stores, where you build 1,000 spaces and it gets used for 20 days a year, and the rest of the year, it's just sucking up heat and causing runoff. And so I think that at some point there needs to be a balance where they say, all right, well, there's 2, maybe 3 days a year where we really have a problem: Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. And maybe we, suck it up and say, our lawn's gonna get a little ruined and we have to do a little bit of extra maintenance, but we're gonna flag out some additional parking. And if there becomes a parking issue on Young's Road, the Board of Selectmen has the ability to post roads as no parking. They have the ability to post portions of roads as no parking. And again, I think anyone who's driven down Young's Road, unless you're pulling up on someone's front lawn, you're most likely not going to park on the side of the road. It's not terribly wide, and it's, people move through there at a reasonable speed. So I get the point. I think the real issue is, are we balancing 3 or 4 days a year versus a day-to-day, week-in, week-out problem? And I think that you can address the day-to-day, week-in, week-out. I think that you kind of have to let the periodic issue sort itself out.
Okay.
And if year after year the same day is an issue,
I have another question.
I think that the police may have more, they may come and push on them and say, listen, you've got to figure this out. And it may be that either build a parking lot or hire detail.
Understood. I don't anticipate a day-to-day issue. That wasn't why I was asking the question. One other question. Are the spots named, or is it a free-for-all? Are the parking spots associated with units, or is it just free-for-all parking? So it's just open parking? Okay.
I want to have a follow-up. So I appreciate your response, but I don't know if, and you don't have to go revisit this, but I don't think you answered the question. So I'm going to presume that, looking at this map, what I'm looking at, and is several abutters on East Street, North Street, and I actually know some people who live on Young's Road, as a side note as well. And what I do know is that this is a community. A lot of people in this area have been here for a while. You do have a lot of seniors in this neighborhood. And during holidays, you normally see parking along these roads when they have people come to visit. Personally, I'm the youngest of 6 children. So 2 years ago, we had a little reunion for my father. And because I have 13 nieces and nephews, and we had some friends over, it was 31 cars. Okay? 31 cars. So what I'm trying to envision is that circumstance in which, sure, several people are gone, but your parking lot's full, and if we can just put ourselves in that worst case scenario, what I see happening is people parking on the grass, people parking on Young's Road, people parking on North Street, and now this is not just a issue for the development, but you're altering the way of life for the people who live around you. And that, I'm pretty anti-regulation until you get to the point that you impact someone else's life. So I wonder if the density is too high, even though I understand what you're doing here.
Well, the density is actually...
Is lower than what...
No, but the density has already been established by the 40R process, so that does not change, okay? There's no discussion today about increasing or decreasing the density of the project. That's already permitted.
Well,
we could actually add the other 2 units back in. I think to address your issue, it may be that we just construct these 14 spaces up front, and that'll take the curse off of what you're talking about, and then hopefully we don't have to do this.
Okay.
I think that, and I've talked to my client about, sure.
I think the density is too high for the amount of parking that you have available. So I don't have again, I think that what you've done with your plan of changing this to senior housing, I support that, period. What I'm concerned about looking at this, and I have several other with your waivers, but looking at this, what I'm concerned about is that the amount of parking is not adequate for the population that you're trying to serve. That's what my concern is. But the other question, within this is looking at, and if we can just go back to one of your other waivers, you're asking for a height of 57 feet. And have you, and I ask this to every question, to every person that comes before us, don't feel singled out by this, have you talked to the abutters?
We talked to the abutters when we did the original proposal, when we had the waiver to 50 feet. Okay, so we already have a waiver on the property from 38 to 50 feet right now. What we're doing is we're adding a 4th floor, and to do that, you need additional height. So the ridge line's being pulled down, and we're only going up 7 feet. Okay? So that's what the proposal is.
Okay.
Is for to get the 4th-story in there. Otherwise, we end up creating a larger footprint.
Yeah,
I understand what you're trying to do there with the, probably, my guess is, because of the additional services, because of the additional community rooms, you're going to have to do something with the structure to fit all of that extra space in there. I do not share my colleague's issue with the parking. think the way you do that, when I go through my neighborhood on a holiday, some people have gone, some people have brought people in, so there's a balance that is naturally struck there. But with the height of the building, I do have an issue with that. We have seen a lot of issues with a couple of the projects in town with the height, and it really is shocking to a lot of people. And it's tough to live with, because you see that. Is there, and I see that you've actually added a lot of detail, I'm guessing, to the exterior of the building, because I can see that you have there's some in-cutting and out, there's a lot more architectural detail to it, looks like, than the other buildings.
Bring the big sheet.
But my concern is that the height is going to be overwhelming.
My apologies, I forgot to hand this out when I first.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to second what David's saying. I'm okay with most of the waivers except for the, including the parking, because I think the parking proposal is reasonable. I do have an issue with the, another 7 feet being added to the height.
Bill Castleton, once again. I just want, on that issue, just to go back to where it came from. It really was a matter of, obviously, it's a sacrifice, essentially, is to make the building taller in order to eliminate a building. So we currently have approved 2 additional buildings with the parking ratio that's currently approved, and we're continuing that parking ratio with this new building, as is currently approved. So in order to eliminate a building, we obviously have to make some concessions, and height was where it was. The reason we felt relatively okay about it, and I know we deal with this all the time, and we understand the concern, is that it is the only building on the site that is in the center of the site. In other words, our driveway and parking go around this building. This is in the center, so it seems to be least impactful to the abutters. I realize that some abutters that are nearest to that building, they'll have an extra 7 feet above what is currently approved for the building that was going to go there. But further up on the site, there's an elimination of a building entirely. So there is trade-off there. I guess that's when we went through this.
What was the existing square footage of the already approved buildings?
The existing
combined?
Square footage combined?
Yeah,
I don't have that off the top of my head, but it was less. I mean, it was more, excuse me. So we are constructing less square footage.
All right, I think you were given relief on the height myself at approximately 31% more than what was allowed by the bylaw, and now you're asking for another 7 feet, which would increase it by another, I think, 14%, which is a significant increase. It almost doubles the required height of the bylaw, so I too would share that concern. If there's no objection to the other from the other board members, I'd honestly like to hear from the public, since they are citing that through history, the parking is not an issue. In the original decision, they said that their project would not impact existing abutters. We now have that history as well, and if there's abutters in the audience, I'd like to hear from
Chair,
them.
if I could just clarify one comment that Bill made relative to the square footage. The square footage of the footprint of the building has decreased.
Right.
Okay, but obviously, when you have the same footprint and you have 4 floors, I don't have the calculation relative to the total square footage of each of the 2 buildings that were there before to the 1 building now, but we can get that information for you.
Okay, yeah, because it could be even, and you're basically...
Through the chair, can I ask one more simple question? Is there any option for increasing the overall dimension of the building and reducing the height?
Right, I mean, I'm not an engineer and I'm not proposing that, but I would think that you could probably compensate, and, you've reduced the footprint, the overall footprint of square footage, single floor square footage, by reducing the number of buildings. But if you made the wings slightly longer, would it be possible to still get the number of units in that you would need, yet not have to add that 4th floor? Because I think that 4th floor is going to be a real issue with the board.
Yeah, I think we tinkered a lot with the design, and we kept coming back to this. If we're trying to get the remaining 2 approved buildings into 1 building, we end up back at a four-story building. We tried stepping the building, down with the grade. We tried to keep it 3 stories, just gets too big in the center of that site and kind of wipes out the rest of the green space, and that's getting on top of the infiltration chambers that you saw on the plan. So we messed around with all those options. We considered keeping the 2 buildings, just as they are approved now, effectively, keeping the footprints as they are, parking as it is, and just changing it to senior, but having 2 buildings built. We felt that as far as the property working well, serving the residents well, since they'll be senior residents, and serving the community well, that getting the amenities for those residents in one building was a really important component of it. And that's why we kept coming back to it. And we tried, we tried to work it as best we could.
All right. I'm going to allow Mr. Allison one more question, then I'll open it up to the general public.
Maybe more than one, but...
All right, well, his line of questioning then?
In the opening discussion, I believe you stated about 2,500 square feet less impervious than the previously approved?
Correct.
That accounts for what, 18 to 20 parking spaces? Our bylaw says 300 square feet for the parking aisle plus the parking space, so...
Roughly, yeah.
So the 14 spaces that you're talking about were complement to the opposite side of the driveway, so that it looks like there was 28 spaces that are not being proposed to be constructed? Is that correct?
Bless you.
Regardless, the 2,500 square feet less impervious was a little bit misleading, I believe, because if you're eliminating 20-plus parking spaces, that's well in excess of, well, minus the drive aisle, of course. I don't see much space for snow storage. To counter Mr. Bernie's comments about Christmas and Easter, I believe we had 2 feet of snow this Easter, and any given Christmas, we could have 3 feet of snow. I'm not sure about snow storage, snow removal, but you can't park in the grass if it's got 3 feet of snow on it. I will echo the previous sentiments that I don't believe there is adequate parking. And I also would ask if the build-out was to add an additional, 50 spaces? You're going to have to redo your drainage calculations and increase your storage and increase your, right?
When the project was originally approved, the reserved parking areas were taken into account.
They were?
Yes.
Okay. I guess my last comment on that would be that I would recommend that we have them build out the total parking spaces, but the stuff that's not proposed in this plan be durable dustless and not necessarily paved and therefore pervious. But it would be available rather than waiting until you have a problem and then addressing it. Why don't you address it before it becomes a problem is my recommendation.
Talking about the 14 spaces on the...
I'm talking about parking in general.
Okay.
They showed us...
Echo pavers, is that what you're suggesting?
Well, there's all kinds of options, but, sure.
All right, I'm going to open it up without any objection from the rest of the board to the public. Is there any public comment from the public in regards to this? Sure, sir, if you wouldn't mind stepping aside, and if you would just identify yourself and speak into the microphone, please.
Thank you. My name is Stephen St. Laurent, and I'm in a butter. I'd like to show you where my house is on the map, if I could.
Would you actually, wow.
This is my house right here. Currently, this entire area is green space. The original plan was to have a building here and one here. This new plan moves all of it right behind my house, and it raises it up, as you were already talking about, to 4 stories high. The top floor is going to be looking in my backyard. Right now, my house is above the area in elevation, but to have a four-story building that size right behind my house is going to be looking into my backyard. And Mr. Jeffries, you're right. It's a nice, quiet neighborhood with seniors like me, and to have a great big building in my backyard, looking in my backyard at this point is unacceptable to me. Original building, one of them was out back here. There are no abutters back here. There's nothing back there, it's all woods. So, I mean, no, why wouldn't you put the whole building over there? That's fine with me. But the issue is that it brings all of the activity of both buildings right behind my house. The main entrance is here. All the parking, all the activity, all the ambulances, all of the stuff that will be going on with this building will be in my backyard. Plus I will have somebody looking at me in my yard. And I feel like the height restrictions are there for a reason. I mean, it's not bad right now when the leaves are all there, but in the winter, through all the winter months, I'll have that right in my face. And that's not why I live here. That's my main concern. The complex right now, I have no issues with the complex now. It's fine. I don't have any parking issues or anything like that. But this is the game changer for me. This is going to bring 270 more cars, all parking in right behind my house. This height, the height of the building, and I just object to the whole thing. I think it's not according to the original plan. It moves everything right to the abutters. These are the abutters right here. There's none over here, and there's none over here. The only abutters are East Street right here, and there's a couple of them here on Youngs Road. But it brings all the activity into the backyard of the abutters, and that's my concern.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Please.
John Syatt from 16 East Street in Lunenburg, and we're one of the butters, and we were never notified, so that's one thing. Another thing is, I used to work at Lunenburg Housing for the elderly, and they didn't have too many extra places for the visitors to park. So where did they park? They parked into residents, their parking spaces, and when they came home, what happens? They don't know who they are or anything else. So there's another thing. And like he said, Stephen says that it's going to be blocking our view from looking over. It's bad enough as it is, but you're going to end up taking a lot of the trees down. It's going to be showing a lot. We'll be having lights shining at us, and so.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Please.
Hi, I'm Susan Syatt, 16 East Street, Lunenburg. We've been living on East Street for 42 years, and this is very upsetting, especially if it goes to the 4th floor. There'll be absolutely no privacy, and then it really will be, how can I word it, louder? But we have had a few incidences during the middle of the night of people roaming from there that have been breaking in. And it's an awful feeling to know that somebody's prowling around and you can't feel safe. And I know they had been told in the beginning that they weren't to come up our streets. But they've been going into cars and things. And I'm glad that it has come to a point now where we had to put in surveillance after 42 years living in a nice, quiet street. And it's upsetting. But to have people view in, that's going to take a lot.
Thank you.
So just to follow up on the elevation, so at 57 feet tall, the top of the building would be 445 feet elevation, and the highest contour shown along East Street is 418. So the folks at 16 East Street and the previous speakers, the top of this building will be equal or above the top of their homes, I believe.
what is, when you add in, when you add in the extra height to the building, and I'm sure you've done some analysis on fire evacuation, so assuming that there's an emergency in the building and there's a senior population on the 4th floor, what are your estimates for how long it would take someone who cannot use an elevator to get out of the building?
I can't speak to that.
Bill?
Yeah. We do not have that number.
Okay. I think that would be, in general, do you have a question? Yeah.
Just for a clarification, we're not the architect, we're just the site engineer.
Correct.
So we don't have that information, but I'm not even sure if that information actually exists.
Okay.
But there may be someone in rescue personnel that could give us some sort of a guidance on that.
Okay.
But it's not something that, not a number that we've ever been asked for, quite
Yeah.
frankly.
I think
In general, the building code doesn't speak to time of evacuation. It speaks to accessible path, distance to an exit, and, you know, the way the structure is built to prevent the spread of the fire.
Thank you. I think that, a couple comments here. I think that what you've engineered is a really good plan. I don't think it's the best plan for this site, but I think it's a very well planned out concept. I think that what was mentioned initially in the introduction about having the services available on site, that is so vital and important, and that to me, you know, speaks to, you know, the responsibility of the management, you know, for this location. And, you know, combing through and looking at how you use the space here, I don't have any objections at all to your engineering plan for it. What my concerns are is how this fits into the neighborhood and the waivers that you're asking for, and whether or not our bylaws permit it. So, with the fire concern, I understand our limitations with what we can't. We can't sit here and make policy. But I think when you're dealing with, when you're servicing a senior population and proposing a 4-story building, I think that one of the natural calculations is this building, and of course you follow the code, and there's no question that the building is gonna, be hard to burn down with all the sprinklers and everything else inside. But I think the concern is, you might have someone on the 4th floor with a heart condition, and the fire alarms are going off, and the sprinklers are going off, and, how long are they going to take to get out of the building? And maybe with one less floor and a perhaps even larger footprint, a little further setback, that may not be such an issue. And then with the abutters, do you have a response to some of the concerns about the height and the people who live in these homes? And
just in general, and I'm not sure where they were pointing relative to the green space, but right now, this is in fact all grass. But that's also the area that's proposed for development. And that was always proposed for development. This roadway layout has not changed since the original approval. All we've really done is adjust where the parking spaces are. We've eliminated some, added some, adjusted where they are left and right. But aside from that, this section here was always being developed. This building, the red outline, is actually in the same location as the building is right now. This building would then be eliminated, which is actually, more into the slope. So the tree line that is out there right now, I do not believe it's being touched relative to the project. But I think there are a lot of questions. There are questions about the height. There's questions about the parking. I think that what we probably should do is go back. Maybe we could meet with the department heads to go over some of these questions as well, Adam, and then come back to the board with where the direction is that we're getting from the town on that aspect of it as well. I think that makes sense.
I think that's an excellent idea. I think, it shows me that you're listening, because this is love the idea of senior housing.
Yes.
The constituents talk to us about this all the time. Glad that you're doing it. I know it's a business decision as well, but I'm glad to see you moving in that direction with it, because I think you're going to find a market for it. I love the detailing that you've shown, the architectural detailing on the building. I think you've added a lot of interest to it, so it's not just a, a flat facade. I have no problem with the parking. It's just the height of the building. This isn't the first time we've seen, those kinds of heights in town. Emerald Place created a lot of issues for the people around there as well because of the height of the buildings. It's not something that's just going to go away because every time it gets over a certain height, it's shocking to everybody. So, I'm glad to hear what you just said because it tells me that you're listening and that maybe there's some kind of compromise that can be had out there, and I hope that that's the case. Thank you.
So yeah, for me, I just want to echo the same thing about the parking. The height, Matt touched on it earlier, and I had actually asked a question about whether it being a ZBA decision or ours. Our ZBA probably does not allow a non-conforming structure, which the existing plan was, because you were given relief on the 38 feet to become more non-conforming, is which in essence what you are doing with the height now. And we're able to make that decision, so that's kind of a sticking point for me is the height. And then I'd also like to see snow storage added where it is just on the plan, so we know what we're looking at for snow storage. And originally I'd gone before the Conscom. I don't know if you've gone back before them.
Yeah, we've actually got the existing permits extended along with the change that's proposed in the plan right now. We also made them aware that the board may adjust the parking layout against them, against the buffer zones, so they're aware of that as well.
Okay. And yeah, just to touch on Michael Ray's comments about how the site accommodates the elderly housing. I mean, we have minimum requirements for ADA compliance, so you've met those, but I would assume if you're housing hundreds of elderly, you may want to have more than minimal, handicap parking spots and things of that nature. I know we can't require it, but it's just something to think about from a practical standpoint. And is there landscaping design that's been modified, or as far as screening or anything in regards to the existing plan, or?
Yeah, the landscape plans that were developed for the original project actually would be the same, because we're not changing anything within that looped road section except for the building, but there's no landscaping that's really prevalent for that. I think one of the things about the open space that we're looking at, that's actually one of the things we're looking at is more of a community garden type of an approach to that for those same elderly people that would be able to use that. So that's more of what we're looking at for that newer open space. But we could probably go back at it and look at the landscaping that was originally reviewed and go from there on that.
Through the chair, there were some emails forwarded from Sully, just to make sure that they got those right.
They did. Okay.
That was going to be my...
I really like the addition of the green space. Even though it moves, I think it's so important to have that as part of plans. So, you guys are very professional people. So I know that I can be a little bit hammering sometimes, but I do appreciate your level of professionalism today.
Process is all about.
No, I appreciate the level of professionalism. I really appreciate the responses that you've offered as well. And look forward to the next public hearing.
So to follow up, if I may, the Chief Sullivan, he had two comments spaced about a week apart. The first one was before he looked at the plans, he wanted to be sure that the four-story building had a peer review for fire protection.
Yep. And I don't want to speak for Great Bridge Property, but the previous four buildings they've built, they agreed to undertake that same process, and we've used the same fire protection engineer each time, and Bill and his team have been great about that.
Okay. And then his other comment was a possible access way behind the building, and with the grading as it's shown, I don't believe that's a possibility for the ladder truck to get access to the fourth floor.
And I think that's probably, if
that's one of the things that we want to meet with him about.
Sure. If we're going to convene a tech review, that's something that we can certainly discuss at that time.
Yeah, I just wanted to have it aired for everybody to hear, because we were distributed that information, and thank you.
Mr. Chair, would you entertain any motions to approve some of the requested waivers?
I think at this point it might be a little premature. I mean, you can
I think so.
But I
you
wonder,
can make any motion you like.
well, I guess the discussion is, I think some things it sounds as if we have consensus on, and just as they go back and kind of draw up, I guess, some changes, if we can offer them some clear guidance on the areas that we are in agreement to. It seems as if we're all supportive of the age restriction. It seems like we're all supportive of the marketing plan. It seems as if we're all supportive of the density decrease. So I think we have a couple here that it seems as if we can agree to.
My opinion is conveying that information is probably good enough. I don't think we need to propose and vote on it because the structure of these would likely change with the design change.
Right. I would agree with Ken.
And so I think we've given you pretty clear indications to what we like, what we don't like. And without actually voting on anything, I think you guys are going to be able to take that away, right? There was also an engineering input from Graves. Did they also review that?
They did.
They received that? Okay. So obviously that would have to be taken into consideration as well.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just address that waiver issue. For the record, Paul Haverty, Blattman, Bobrowski, and Haverty representing the applicant. I think perhaps we were remiss in, at the beginning of this process, not sort of walking you through exactly what type of development this is. I know that most of the board probably was not around back in 2007 when this was originally approved, although you may have been, aware of the process as it was going forward. But this is a Chapter 40R development. And in that process, what it requires is for the board to adopt a whole new zoning provision, a whole new section of your zoning bylaw that really stands apart from the rest of your zoning. And one of the most important features of Chapter 40R is, in fact, that it grants the ability to provide waivers of any zoning provision. And in particular, your zoning bylaw in Chapter 254.13 N1 specifically states, upon the request of the applicant, the planning board may waive dimensional and other requirements of this section, including the performance standards of subsection K, in the interests of design flexibility and overall project quality, and upon the finding of consistency of such variation with the overall purpose and objectives of the Tri-Town Smart Growth District, or if it finds that such waiver will allow the project to achieve the density, affordability, mix of uses, and/or physical character allowable under this section. So that grants you a great deal of latitude as to what provisions of this self-contained bylaw that you can waive. So with regards to your question as to whether or not there's any need to go to the Board of Appeals for waivers, you have all authority necessary to grant waivers under this requirement. Really, the only thing that you can't waive is the affordability requirement, because that's statutory, and that requires a minimum of 10%, although you have a higher percentage in your bylaw, and we're not proposing anything different. That allows you actually to count all of the units on your subsidized housing inventory.
Because they're rental?
Because they're rental.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, but if you did it at you did it at the 20% required by the statute, and you didn't do it at the 50% area median income, you would only get to count the actual 20%. If you did the 25% at 80% area median income, you get to count all of them.
I guess for me, I understand we have the ability and the discretion to waive those things, but I also feel that you've been granted in the existing decision a lot of latitude, so.
Understood. I just wanted to make the point that all of the authority you need is vested within this board. You don't have to go looking elsewhere.
No,
Right.
I understand that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If we're otherwise done, I just want to thank the board for the time.
Thank you.
Your input. and we'll go back and kind of look at some of these issues, and, we've kind of kicked a lot of them around, but we'll kick them around some more.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I think before...
Continuation.
Well, yeah, hold on.
Before you step away, but what sort of time frame are you looking at to come back around? The board's next meeting is June 11th, because our next regularly scheduled meeting would land on Memorial Day. I think the board's generally been in the habit of looking to the applicant to sort of identify what kind of time frame they want. I think that it's probably reasonable to expect we could put together a tech review for next week sometime. But if you want to do some assessment on your own before you come back and talk to us and push that out later, I want to leave that up to you. I don't want to sort of force you into one thing or the other.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think standing here now, I would say that the 11th would be fine.
Okay.
This is a site we've been developing for so long, we know it so well.
Sure.
We probably can look at a lot of these issues pretty quickly.
Okay, then I'll work with Bill to set something up for next week, and I think if you'll just request the board continue to the 11th, I think they'd be willing to entertain that.
Continuance so requested.
Actually, before I entertain a motion, I would just like to open it back up to the abutters. If any of you have any questions or comments prior to us continuing the hearing? Would you mind coming up to the microphone so everybody at home can hear?
Thank you. Does that mean you're reconvening this process again on the 11th?
Continuing, we're not making any decisions. They're going to make some revisions, hopefully.
So they'll present those revisions on June 11th? Correct.
If we accept the motion and continue it till then, yes.
Thank you.
I have a comment.
Sure.
I would like to correct my statement on the presenter's statement. The Graves Review letter states that there are approximately 25,000 square feet of less impervious, not 2,500. That gives a lot more flexibility, and...
Yeah, I will double check those numbers, but I think you might have a typo.
Either one of those numbers could be wrong, so I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Do we want to clarify that their request for the continuance has to be in writing?
It doesn't.
It doesn't?
No, because this is a site plan, it's not a special permit.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Then I would move that we continue to June 11th.
Second.
Before that, do we need just the site plan continuance, since it's not a special
Correct,
permit?
and the other is just they're asking for waivers under the bylaw.
Okay.
There isn't a formal hearing structure
All right.
under that bylaw.
There's not two separate timelines, right?
There is not.
Okay, just want to make sure. Well, there is, but with the extensions then. Okay. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
It sounds as though there's consensus to support most aspects of this plan. So I just wanted to state that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be in touch, Bill.
Thank you.
Maybe keep these?
Thank you.
All right, moving on to our next agenda item is minutes approval
Minutes.
from April 23rd, 2018. Any questions or comments?
I'm sorry? I missed it.
You should be. Any questions or comments on the minutes?
No.
No.
Great minutes, Marjorie.
All right.
Thank you.
We need to motion second minutes now, after the open meeting law training. It's the advice of council in general to, the only way to approve something through a public body is motion and second.
All righty, then I would accept the motion.
Motion, we propose we accept the minutes of 4/23/18.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do I need to sign them now? Yeah, you already did. Committee reports, capital planning.
Capital planning has not met. Stormwater, got out of order. AgCom is going to meet this Thursday. And Stormwater Task Force, we're going to be meeting also this Thursday at the Ritter to go over a draft of our grant application for the Upper Mulpus.
All right.
MJTC, I was not able to attend as I was in San Francisco, but was anybody else able to attend in my stead?
I was not able in your
Okay.
stead.
Then I will update when I receive the minutes.
MRPC, I thought I was going to be home, and it turned out I was not, so I missed that. But open space, we did meet. We are going to be putting together a plan to review the open space plan, and we'll be holding a meeting, our first meeting, to sort of divvy up the workload on the 30th, Wednesday the 30th, and it'll be here in this room. If anybody, we're going to also make a short public announcement about why it's important. We're trying to get people involved. We need everybody's input. There's going to be some surveying going on, and it's probably some charrettes or something at some point, so.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that's sort of a kickoff meeting?
Yes.
And it is a public forum of sorts to get people involved, and all public officials and residents and anyone who's interested in open space in Lunenburg is invited to attend that.
Yes, and please do. Please come out. We need your support on this.
Charter review?
Yeah, charter review has not met since our public hearing at the beginning of April. And we have a meeting scheduled for next Wednesday, May 23rd.
All right. Green Communities Task Force met last Thursday. I wasn't able to attend, but apparently they received information on the streetlight buyback program, estimates from Unitil and an outside vendor, and we need to discuss how the town will procure the streetlights and what the return on investment is. We're looking at several different options, 3 different options to be exact, so we need to discuss that. The grant application was accepted, I believe, for the 2017. I think it was in the amount of $230,000, including some administrative, to offset administrative costs and the time of some of our employees of the town, so, and that's about it. Director's items.
So it's the first time we've met since town meeting. Some of you were there, some of you weren't. It was a rollicking good time.
So sad I missed it.
So all of the zoning minus the time limit change on special permits were approved, which I notified you all of. That should be certified sometime this week. The votes certified by the town clerk, and she'll put together her packet to send into the Attorney General for review, and I can't imagine there's anything the Attorney General is going to flag, so we're going to operate under the bylaws or enforce as of town meeting, and we'll start putting together new books for you guys to have and pour over and go through and change.
So I was going to ask you that. So it is as of the date that it was voted?
It is as of the date of town
action?
meeting, correct.
Okay, cool.
Now,
I wasn't sure if there was some kind of...
there's a weird legal gray area
Yeah,
where
yeah.
if the Attorney General flags something or kicks something out and somebody has operated under it, you get into this. But usually that, if your town council has looked at it, they're going to have advised you of something that looks really wonky or cautionary, and we didn't really get any of that. So I'm not too worried about it.
Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, so in regards to the one that didn't pass, can we add that to the ongoing items?
Sure.
Because I think we need to have some discussion regarding that and how we initiated it to fix a problem, and it didn't pass, so we still have the problem, so.
I think
I think there's other ways we can address it. I've talked to Adam about it, but we just need to be kind of proactive when approaching those.
And I'll take some of the blame for that not passing. I thought there was pretty universal support, and I probably didn't show up with enough, this is what other communities do, and examples, but, I've never seen a community do that to themselves, impose that sort of time frame. So, it wasn't even something that I really thought needed preparation, other than statute says this, and this is how it works, and we're doing this other strange thing, and I kind of got blindsided with this really...
Surprise!
Well, and it was... I I understand the thought process that went into the opposition to it.
Was there a lot of people opposing it?
No.
We lost by 4.
We lost by 4. There was 2 vocal people. Their concern was that defaulting to the statutory language meant the special permit hearing could theoretically go on indefinitely. And if a board felt that they didn't like an application, they could just sort of put them into some phantom zone of public hearing process where they just keep continuing it, and the applicant has no rights, and they just sort of keep it on their agenda, and this person just kind of gives up. Which I guess, yeah, but no. Could it happen? Sure, but I don't think anybody's really interested in doing that. If a board is that opposed to something, they're going to find a reason to say no, especially in the frame of special permit where it's discretionary and there's, they have wide latitude to say no. But that...
So we really, the way that we structured the rewording was that there would be no limit?
Well, it would follow the statutory time limit. So the statute says you have 65 days from the application to hold a public hearing. You have 90 days from the close of the public hearing to render a decision. You have 14 days to file that decision. It doesn't say
how many public
it doesn't say how long the public hearings can go on. And yes, I understand theoretically it could go on forever.
Well, we have had some that have gone for a long time.
But it's boilerplate stuff. It's,
but I think that the ones that have gone on forever have been by mutual consent. And
actually, it's probably more promoted by the
applicant. And I think that if the board's that opposed to something, they're going to say no. And if the board, I would never say, let's just keep continuing it. If you're opposed to it, just say no.
Yeah.
Tell them why you're saying no and say no. If they disagree, there's a litigious path for them to follow.
Yep.
And, I think that the time limit as it is actually encourages the board to say no more often and creates the specter of litigation on a more regular basis.
The time limit set to what now, 90 days?
90 days from the date that it's filed.
From the date it's filed,
So
not the
that
date of
really,
the first public hearing.
Correct. So that really gives the board 79 days to hold a public hearing and render a decision, because 21 days is eaten up by taking the application in, reviewing it, placing the ad, and going through the statutory required 7 and 14 days of advertising.
I think just boils down to, just like we did tonight, we just need to be precise with what we're looking for. Ask for it up front, be blunt if we need to. There's nothing now that precludes us from extending it indefinitely at their request. All they need to do is request it. And I'm not gonna approve a project just because we're running out of time on the time clock.
I advocated hard at town meeting for this approval, but I think, I'd say you're probably being a little too hard on yourself in that one, Adam, but I think what hurt us in getting this approved was that there was, again, a minority, but a vocal opposition that voiced concern that without actually seeing what we were changing from to what we were changing to, there was an opportunity there to present an argument that we were moving to this long-range, indefinite process that is not business-friendly. When in fact, I think we are moving to a, regular, a Commonwealth kind of process that everyone here in the state follows, with the exception of a handful of towns, including Lunenburg.
I thought what hurt us was it was 3:30 when we started talking about it.
Well, it may be.
Maybe that's just me.
So there wasn't any discourse about how this has tripped us up in the past.
We didn't.
There wasn't any.
No, it's such a sensitive subject to use as a defense for changing a bylaw. The fact that we're in pending litigation based on that, I think, is
A little irritating.
I think it's, I can't imagine why it would be problematic to just say, listen, this is a problem. You know, it needs to be corrected.
Well, and
It's caused errors in the past. It just needs to be corrected so that everything you look at online, every piece of information that the state hands out, it all follows that timeline.
It all follows that, yeah. And
So anybody would be within their right mind to look at the state documentation and say, yeah, look at it, that's the way it should unfold.
And the board has the right to represent it, so we can,
Okay.
you know, we can draw something up either similar, different, or slightly different for fall.
Okay.
I mean, I'll take my share of the blame. I wasn't able to make town meeting.
No, I wasn't either. I got
Supposed to
hauled away.
do. I apologize to you guys and the town itself. I mean, I was an advocate for this since we first discovered it, so. Anyways, we'll work through it and
One more crack
deal
at
with
it?
it.
But there'll be more firefighters now, so when we all have a heart attack the next time, we'll be okay.
All right.
So 319, Matthew mentioned this in his committee report from Stormwater. You all have a draft letter and a very brief one-page synopsis of the work program, the Stormwater Task Force, working with our consultants from Design Consultants Incorporated and the Mass Watershed Coalition, are submitting a grant application to the 319 program through the DEP. 319 is a watershed restoration and preservation grant program, and the town is looking to install, I think it's 5 best management practices for stormwater in the upper Mulpus Basin. So that would be north of Hickory Hills Lake, and these are under a new section of this grant for healthy watershed. So basically, that area is less than 6% impervious area. The Mulpus Brook in that area is a cold water fishery, and we have a number of catch basins that outlet directly adjacent to or directly into the Mulpus Brook in using a variety of structural means that maybe aren't the most beneficial to the water up there. And so what this would do is the town would pay 50% and 319 grant would pay 50%. It would perform some structural work, construction of best management practices, grass swales, water slowing techniques, infiltration techniques to maintain the cold water fishery within the brook. It would perform a riverine corridor study of the area so that the town can strategize going forward on how to continue to preserve the healthy watershed, and it would do some other minor engineering stuff and general maintenance and cleanup of these 5 basins. So what the committee is looking to do is get as much support as possible from other boards, committees, and groups that have some impact on land use and the impact of stormwater. So attached, you'll find a sort of, I'll call it a draft letter. It's a template for the board to sort of either say, great, or change a few things and go ahead. But this would be essentially a letter of support from the planning board for the Stormwater Task Force application to the 319 grant as stakeholders in a variety of different matters within stormwater. The DPW does have funds to match the required cash match. In addition, there'll be some in-kind donations of services from private groups and town staff from their labor and materials. Do you have anything else that you think I missed?
No, basically, we're asking for $80,000 for our $80,000 match, and as people may know, Jack got the $4 million for the road improvements, of which $500,000 was earmarked for stormwater, and that's where our $80,000 match will come from, I believe.
I read it, it sounds great. What do we need, just an approval?
It's just a vote from the board, you know, I mean, you guys obviously have a copy of the template letter, and if there's things that you want changed, great. If you're good with what it says, great. I think when Ed wrote it, he put me in just because it's easy to get my signature, but if you'd prefer Greg to sign it as chair of the planning board, you can do that. I mean,
You can both sign it.
we can also add in, I'm writing to indicate the planning board support as well as my own, something to that effect.
And the other committees will do their own, like...
Correct, yeah, the
So we don't
Stormwater
have to-
Task Force doesn't have to do one because they're kind of applying, but I know Concom has their letter of support on Wednesday's agenda. I believe the Open Space Chair has been sent a separate letter to review and look at potentially submitting. So there's a number of bodies that will be submitting letters of support.
I'm no grant expert, but it sounds like a good, well-worded, letter, so I would support it. If you can say that, if you get the vote tonight, then everybody supports it, then if you could say that we all support it, I think it would add some weight.
Accept the motion to the effect. Wanna make one?
I move that we accept the letter as written.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. All right.
So, let's talk about pot.
Let's talk about pot.
So, I've had my first foray dealing with people looking to come and grow the pot in the Lunenburg, and they were slightly dismayed to hear that they wouldn't be able to get to market for July 1st, but I don't think they were shocked. So there's certainly
Excuse me, are these recreational?
Yes.
Okay.
This individual holds a medical license, but ideally, I think that, it was for the recreational sphere that he was a priority applicant in the recreational sphere. I think there was some disappointment that, we were taking our time with doing it. I think he had a site that he was excited about. I think that the potential changes at town meeting also put a little bit of a damper on his desire, and more...
Are we talking growing, distribution?
He was looking at cultivation only at this time. He was hoping to process as well, beyond agricultural processing, the actual pressing, processing side of things. He said speed to market is really where he's at right now. So that made me think he's, really looking more towards the recreational side of things. He had some issues with the 500-foot setback where he was looking. He potentially could get a dimensional variation through the special permit from the zoning board. I think that where he was looking, it was more, the land that he abutted was residential, but was unusable. So it was a case where that special permit dimensional may be reasonable, only because there would never be a resident residing where he was looking to place his building within 500 feet of the line. Again, I haven't heard back from him, and I honestly don't think that I will until probably November, if at all, just because he's looking to get in things planted now. I think what we need to do is sort of sketch out or brainstorm at least a timeline for what the board may be looking to do as far as getting input underway. Those of you that were at town meeting, you couldn't have missed the flyer looking for input if you had tried. It was bright pink and had a pot leaf that was about 6 inches tall on it. So, and really all I said was, if you're concerned, if you have questions, if you have comments, send them to me or come to a board meeting and just start shouting at public comment about what your concerns are. And that's great. We'll probably get a couple of people who do that. But I think it's incumbent on the board to now say, okay, we have until November. We'll have a November town meeting, which means we need to have a bylaw reasonably ready to go in October, like beginning of October. And it's going to be summertime before we know it. My recommendation is that either at the second meeting in June or at another night, mid-June to later, the board schedule some sort of listening session. I don't think it needs to be, well, this is what we're thinking about the bylaw. What do people think? Where should we do it? Should we do it? How should we do it? And just sort of take in input. Maybe try to tamp down any wild or speculative rumors that are just clearly harmful to the process. People can't have pot leaves on any signage to do with recreational marijuana businesses. It's prohibited by the Cannabis Control Commission. So we don't have to worry that we're going to have one and someone's going to, put a sign up that's a 36-foot square pot leaf. It's just not.
That wouldn't match the sign bylaw anyway.
Depends on the zone.
If it was a flag.
A neon sign?
And some things are going to be out of the town's control. What retail businesses are selling are going to be out of our control. We can't prohibit them from retailing things that are permitted from the Cannabis Control Commission. We can't say you can only sell leaves, you can't sell tinctures, or you can't sell edibles. It's all or nothing. And talk about, we need to give a little bit of information on what the process is if the town decides they want to prohibit some or all of any of the uses, because we were a yes community. And I think that then that gives July and August for the board to knuckle down and, look at the bylaw and put something together for a reintroduction early September.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
I have no doubt that you have done tons of research on this already. Do you feel adequately prepared to be the one, or standing there as the authority, or is this something we could approach Adam Costa with?
He
could be there. And
he's done this in several communities, and I think it would be incredibly beneficial to have him available to assist with this.
Good.
Because I'm confident that I can answer many of the questions. I'm comfortable having the discussion, but man, you sit 3 lawyers in a room and you're going to get 6 different answers depending on what you ask them about it. The referendum allows for indoor and outdoor cultivation. I've had one attorney tell me that you can prohibit outdoor cultivation and require it all to be indoor, and I've had another say that if you do that, you have to go for a ballot referendum because you're prohibiting one of the allowed uses. So ultimately, it kind of comes down to, okay, he's our attorney. He needs to be able to defend us, so let's go with what his answers are.
Yep.
And he's done this in several other communities that are, sort of ahead of where we are. So I think it's best that we pick a date and bring him in and say, is this a good date for you?
Okay.
And then, that gives, like I said, July and August to really craft the bylaw. Have a reintroduction to mid-September to the public for hey, this is what we came up with. And then, put the article together and continue to fine-tune with the public what's in the bylaw and how it works and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so second June meeting you're suggesting?
I would say second June meeting, or, some...
I'd say the second June, because the sooner the better.
Yeah.
And also, just to be clear, we actually need to get this before the fall town meeting because the moratorium is up.
Correct, at the end of November.
So we have to, we need
Or
to do
else
this.
it's basically all by right.
All right.
So June 25 it is.
If we don't get a bylaw passed by the time the moratorium ends, it's basically going to defer to state law, right? And
Correct,
just-
it's open season.
That's it.
It's sort of,
By right everywhere.
you probably weren't involved in
By
planning at the
500
time,
feet.
but it's sort of like when adult uses became regulated.
Before
When
we had
they-
our solar bylaw.
When they defined them. If you didn't specifically zone them, you couldn't prohibit them, and if you didn't have specific zoning for them, they'd go wherever they wanted.
What is, I mean, the moratorium, I know it's November, what day in November is it? Is it like?
November, a 30 or 31
Is it
month?
prior to town meeting?
No,
Yeah, that's the question.
It's the last day of November.
You don't want it to create a loophole that
No,
if they get an application in prior to town meeting, we haven't passed it.
I actually think it's December 1.
I thought it was December 1 as well.
All right.
Thank you.
Solar energy?
Really happy Thanksgiving.
That would just, yeah.
All right. Notices and communications, I believe we've all received those. Meeting schedule, May 19th is our annual election. Everyone get out and vote, please. June 11th is our next regularly scheduled meeting, and June 25th. So the 11th, we have the continuation of this, and the 25th, we'll possibly having a public input session with town council. All righty, any public comment from the public? Any public comment from the board?
Yes, I just wanted to encourage people one more time, Wednesday the 30th, 7:30, I believe the time is, Town Hall. We're going to have the Open Space Committee meeting for just input from the public. We could really use it. There is money on the table, there are grants, especially with the new look of our commerce plan, coming down the pike, talk about trail systems and outdoor recreation. A lot of that hinges on open space, and a lot of the quality of our open spaces are going to hinge on what kind of grant money we can get for improvements to open space and to create more open space. So we're really looking at the public to provide some input on where they would like to prioritize acquisition, that kind of thing, improvements.
What date was that?
That is Wednesday the 30th. I believe it's the 7:30.
7:30.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not on the board, but I'll encourage everybody to go out and vote too. Let's see if we can break the 600 voter mark.
Have we ever done that?
In presidential years. Then we get 800.
Ooh. And I would like to make a public comment as well. This is my last meeting as a member of this body, and certainly coming here, I fully expected to be here for 5 more years. Of all the things that I've done in the course of my life, I can honestly say that this has been one of the most rewarding experiences. I've really enjoyed working with you guys. I really appreciate how really helpful you guys have all been. I know Greg got a lot of phone calls from me for a long time, asking a lot of questions. And, I really appreciate, Greg, the support and the leadership you've offered. And also to Adam and Marjorie. I know that Marjorie gets phone calls from me and emails and visits, and and you guys have been a really great support for our town and great support for the board. So this has been a very great experience, and I'm very confident in the abilities of this board, and I trust that after this election, that you will have a very capable, intelligent member joining you guys.
I'd say it was a pleasure to meet you and have you on the board, and I'm sure your replacement will be up to the task.
You're always welcome to come to the other side of the podium, so.
I will be.
But no, thank you for the compliment, and it's nice meeting you as well, and I wish you the best in your future endeavors.
Yeah, thank you for your service to the board.
Yeah, thank you.
Definitely. Thank you.
So did we skip over the ongoing items?
No, that's
We would
next,
just-
that's public comment. So ongoing items, unless there's any more public comment from the board.
Oh,
after.
yeah, actually, just one more comment. Was it a comment or more of a
We like to comment.
a request for information, if anybody can help me out. They just paved West Street, and they left a large berm. Does that get flattened out into an apron? Is that what they
Where?
do? Across each driveway?
No.
Or does it just stay like a mound?
I would pick up the phone and call the DPW.
Okay, just curious, all right.
Usually,
Use it for a bike jump.
the berm gets pulled by a small machine.
Yeah.
And usually driveway stuff is handwork.
Yeah.
So usually they stop and discontinue the berm at each driveway.
Oh,
I don't know. I'd call the DPW director and just
yeah, just check in.
say, hey,
All right, I
I'm
can do
curious.
that.
They've kept the one at my house, but I'll tell you, it's really reduced the amount of wash away of my driveway.
Oh, yeah.
Put it out there on Facebook. See-
I don't think Jack would appreciate that.
I'm not sure you're supposed to make comments like that, even during public comment.
Ongoing items, the Village of Flat Hill, do we have any kind of update?
Yeah, we're gonna bring that back to the Board of Selectmen. We have,
Who's we?
the DPW director and I are going to talk about that at the Board of Selectmen next week, tentatively. I'm putting together a letter with the building commissioner now on getting the Village at Flat Hill to return their drainage structures to whence they were approved. But
Back to the as-bills.
correct. And, you know, that will be an enforcement action, but I think
I guess,
what it appears is that a lot of the water is coming from an undeveloped parcel. And how that water is getting to that undeveloped parcel is indeterminate at this time.
Water does not come from undeveloped parcels unless it's a spring.
Well, again, the water is traveling across that parcel, and the parcel adjacent to that is also undeveloped. So there's some question about where that water is coming from. If it's coming from the drainage basins, then that would be addressed through them correcting the drainage basins.
can we get, I mean, are you bringing it tomorrow night, or?
No.
Can we get some sort of official update, since it was our approval for that, so that we are...
Well, again, once the
Whether or not-
enforcement action happens, you'll get an official copy of that.
Right, so we're gonna make a formal request to them as...
Correct.
As the planning board.
Well, no, as the zoning commissioner,
Okay.
because it's a zoning enforcement.
Okay.
Because it was approved under a
After we
zoning.
approve it, it goes
Correct,
in for
yeah.
enforcement? All right, well...
So I think what will happen
Do
is
we
he and I have done this before, we'll probably both end up signing it.
Okay.
But he has all the,
We don't need
Power
to make
thing.
any kind of a motion to request that enforcement?
no, I believe you did that at when the resident came in front of you,
Okay.
if I remember correctly.
I remember
All
that
right.
we did.
Yeah, just for
I've
basically a
put-
periodic review, he does the review, and then...
Because we
Sites.
pulled everything out, and, you know, it was approved in the mid-90s, there's no O&M plan, there's no specific requirement within any of the drainage stuff to maintain it, and that's all before stormwater management was, I don't want to say mandatory, but it was when it was, went from before it was a manual, it was a handbook.
Formally regulated.
Yeah, and it was sort of, oh, well, here's some things you might want to do, and now here's the things you have to do.
Well, yeah, I know in the past, we've written it right into the decision that the maintenance of the storm,
Yeah, and now
the
all of
swales and
the,
whatever.
yeah, now all the calcs you get come with an O&M plan built in as an appendix, and this, you know, doesn't have, it just has a bunch of, you know, hydraulic curves and flow rates and stuff like that.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Sign by law, anything? Nope. Economic development?
Just the same update from last time with the DLTA. The Montechusett Regional Planning Commission, through their district local technical assistance, is working with the Board of Selectmen and the Business Association to put together a business brochure, which will, it won't list all the businesses, it will sort of tout the business climate and the types of businesses in Lunenburg, and we'll have a QR code or a link back to the town's Google Doc that has businesses who have registered in town, and they'll be working with myself and this board on a permitting guidebook which they just completed for Shirley. I spoke with them in general about the contract. I know the town manager has signed the contract, but I haven't had any contact with them since then.
Have we instituted the online permitting yet?
It is live for internal staff only at this time. We're in the process of sort of getting it off the ground as a live entity, and probably early to mid next month it'll be available for external applicants.
Okay, and have we had any movement on any kind of, since yourself and the town manager initiated the interest in having a chairs meeting, have we?
We have not heard anything. I will schedule.
Received support from every chair.
Yep.
Except Save Board of Health, so.
So we'll schedule that after reorganizations.
Okay.
Since that will happen in July, so maybe we'll schedule it for September, unless you want to try to do it in August.
I just think it coincides with economic development
does.
and permitting and all that, so I think it's just keep the momentum going.
Mm-hmm.
Can I comment on
First
that?
discussed this over a year ago, so.
Can I comment on that, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think, as we're starting to move, all these pieces are moving together in the same direction now. I think it's becoming more and more important that the chairs sort of get on the same page. Especially with, there may be new committees that need to be
I mean,
formed.
If the chairs themselves aren't interested, send a delegate,
Yeah.
I mean, that's all we need to do. And it should be the decision of the board, not just the chair, to participate, so. Sorry.
It's okay.
All right, any board comments or concerns?
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to jump to Freddie, Mike. Rick. So, the change in the acceptance of the minutes, there was a change in the open meeting law before, and then Copeland and Page interpreted that to mean that we didn't need to officiate them?
There was a change in the open meeting law, and I had seen multiple bodies and talked to multiple town councils, and they said it was a formal acceptance. At the open meeting law training 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
3 weeks ago?
With the new town council?
Our current town council said the only way for an elected or any town body to approve anything is through motion and vote, and that includes minutes.
Okay, so then I need to correct my comments to all the groups that I've mentioned that to.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
So on the student initiative, so there was some communication, reached out to the town clerk and the high school to encourage students, I think I failed to mention this at our last meeting, to encourage students to be registered to vote. However, given the obvious conflict, I have not been a part of that process. I do not know what the follow-up actually was. I think it would be a gross problem for me to get too involved with that. But it was a conversation which, was just encouraging them to give the information out to the student bodies. That way the seniors would be able to register to vote and begin their civic duty. So otherwise, I would request that, regardless of the results of what happens this Saturday, that I would be able to continue to support the board in this capacity for the student initiative, and I would also be looking to continue to work with the Board of Selectmen and the town manager to promote this.
Have we officially adopted that position as under us, or?
I don't know that, I know Michael has been working on it. I don't know that it was ever, I don't know that it's a formal initiative or that there's a specific position.
Right.
So, I think this was sort of something you took on your own. So I don't know that you would necessarily need the board's support. If you're working with the town manager to further something, even as a private citizen, and you wanted something from the board, you could always come and ask for their support or for them to grant you something. But I don't think that there's anything for them to undertake at this time.
Independently. It's just like if you brought the Cub Scouts here or the Boy Scouts here.
Correct.
It's
Certainly
Girl Scouts.
support it personally.
We do, and you still have my support. If you want a partner to go out there and, work it with you, I would be happy to.
All right. I intend to continue this effort. I think it's so important, no matter what positions we hold, but to bridge the gap, you know?
Yep.
Sure.
Agreed.
Thank you. Is that it?
Move to adjourn?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Well, Dave, if there's one thing I've heard, it's that you can work it.
It's not true, I don't